Racist cop attacks black woman in court without knowing she's his new police chief. The courthouse in Charleston was packed that day, buzzing with activity as lawyers, defendants, and onlookers shuffled in and out of courtrooms. It was a place where justice was meant to be served. But for years, whispers of corruption and discrimination had tarnished its reputation. Among the crowd was Sergeant Roy Benson, a burly, no-nonsense police officer known as much for his short temper as for his deeply ingrained prejudices. He had worked in the force for over 2 decades and had seen himself as untouchable. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and please like the video. Thank you. Today, Benson was present to testify in a case involving a young black man he had arrested for a minor traffic violation. The man had alleged Benson used excessive force during the arrest, a claim Benson denied with a smirk. As he leaned against the courtroom wall, his eyes landed on a striking black woman in her early 40s. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, her presence commanding attention. She walked confidently, her posture exuding both authority and grace. Benson's lip curled in disdain. "Another one," he muttered under his breath. The woman made her way to the defense table, speaking briefly with the young lawyer representing the black man in question. Unbeknownst to Benson, this woman, Olivia Carter, had been recently appointed as the new police chief of Charleston, a fact that had been strategically kept under wraps until her official announcement the following day. The trial began with the prosecutor presenting Benson as a witness. His testimony was filled with his usual bravado, painting himself as a hero who had only used necessary force to subdue a dangerous suspect. Olivia listened intently from her seat, her expression neutral, but her sharp eyes catching every detail. When the defense attorney began his cross-examination, things took a turn. The lawyer presented a video captured by a bystander that contradicted Benson's testimony. In the footage, Benson was seen aggressively yanking the young man out of his car and throwing him to the ground without provocation. The courtroom murmured in shock, but Benson remained unfazed. "That video doesn't show what happened before," he said dismissively, his tone dripping with arrogance. "I did what I had to do." As the judge reviewed the evidence, Benson's eyes wandered back to Olivia. He noticed her jotting down notes, her expression still unreadable. Something about her calm demeanor irked him. During a brief recess, Benson approached her. "So, what's your deal?" he asked, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "You some kind of activist lawyer here to make my life harder?" Olivia turned to face him, her expression serene. "I'm here to ensure justice is served," she replied evenly. Her calm response only fueled his anger. "Justice, huh? People like you don't even know what that means," he sneered. Before she could respond, the bailiff called everyone back into the courtroom. As Olivia walked past Benson to return to her seat, he muttered something under his breath that made her stop. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice steady but with an edge. Benson smirked, leaning in slightly. "I said, maybe you should stick to whatever it is people like you do. Leave the real work to the rest of us." The courtroom had quieted down and several people turned to look. Olivia didn't respond. Instead, she walked to her seat, her composed demeanor intact. The trial resumed, and it became increasingly clear that Benson's testimony was falling apart. When the defense rested, the judge looked displeased, but before he could make a ruling, Benson lost his temper. As Olivia stood to leave the courtroom during a short recess, Benson stepped into her path. "Think you're better than me, huh?" he barked, his face red with anger. Olivia said nothing, but her silence only enraged him further. Without warning, Benson kicked her in the chest, sending her stumbling backward. The courtroom gasped in collective shock. Several officers rushed to intervene, but Olivia regained her balance, holding up a hand to stop them. "I'm fine," she said calmly. Though her voice carried the weight of authority, she adjusted her suit, her eyes locking onto Benson. The judge banged his gavel furiously. "Sergeant Benson, you are out of line. Bailiff, take him into custody immediately." As the bailiff approached, Olivia spoke up. "Wait." The room fell silent. She walked toward Benson, who was now visibly nervous. "I am, do you?" she asked, her tone icy. Benson scoffed, though his bravado was faltering. I don't care who you are. Well, you should, Olivia said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a badge and held it up for the room to see. I'm Olivia Carter, your new police chief. The courtroom erupted into stunned whispers. Benson's face turned ashen. That's not possible, he stammered. Oh, it's very possible, Olivia said, stepping closer. And let me make one thing clear. Your behavior, both in this courtroom and on the streets, is a disgrace to the badge you wear. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending an internal investigation. Benson opened his mouth to protest, but Olivia silenced him with a raised hand. Save it. You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself to the review board, and don't think for a second that this assault will go unpunished. The law applies to everyone, including you. As Benson was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the room broke into applause. Olivia turned to the judge. Your Honor, I apologize for the disruption. I'll ensure this matter is handled appropriately. The judge nodded, clearly impressed. Thank you, Chief Carter. I trust the Charleston Police Department is in good hands. As Olivia left the courthouse, she felt the weight of the day's events settle on her shoulders. She knew her position would come with challenges, but she was ready. For too long, people like Benson had operated with impunity. It was time for a new era, one of accountability, justice, and integrity, and she would lead it. As Olivia Carter walked out of the courthouse, the warm Charleston sun greeted her, but her mind remained focused. The events in the courtroom had only solidified her determination to clean up the department she had just inherited. She had faced plenty of resistance in her career, but this was personal. Benson wasn't just a rogue cop. He was emblematic of a deeper problem, a culture of entitlement and unchecked power that had plagued the force for years. The next morning, Olivia convened an emergency meeting at the Charleston Police Department headquarters. Officers of all ranks were summoned to the main briefing room. Word of the courtroom incident had spread quickly, and the room buzzed with a mix of curiosity and unease. Olivia entered, her commanding presence immediately silencing the chatter. She walked to the front of the room and stood behind the podium, her sharp gaze scanning the crowd. Good morning, she began, her voice steady and authoritative. As many of you are aware, yesterday an incident occurred in the courthouse that involved one of our own. Let me make something crystal clear. This department will not tolerate abuse of power, misconduct, or any behavior that undermines the trust we are meant to uphold. Effective immediately, there will be a full review of our policies, practices, and personnel. A few murmurs rippled through the room, but Olivia continued undeterred. Sergeant Roy Benson's actions are not isolated. They are a symptom of a larger problem. Starting today, that problem ends. Each of you will be held to the highest standards of conduct. If that's an issue for anyone here, the door is right there. You're free to leave. The room fell silent. No one moved, but tension was palpable. Olivia took a deep breath, softening her tone slightly. I didn't take this job to be a figurehead. I took it because I believe this department can be better, and I know many of you believe that too. We have an opportunity to rebuild trust with this community, but it's going to take work, and it starts now. After the meeting, Olivia met with her newly appointed internal affairs team. She had handpicked officers with impeccable records and a reputation for fairness to lead the investigation into Benson and others like him. We need to act swiftly but thoroughly, she told them. I want every complaint reviewed, every incident analyzed. Leave no stone unturned. Meanwhile, Benson sat in a holding cell, awaiting his disciplinary hearing. Stripped of his badge and uniform, he was no longer the untouchable officer he had once been. Reality was beginning to sink in. His attorney had advised him to prepare for the worst, as both the assault on Olivia and the evidence of his misconduct left little room for defense. When Benson's hearing arrived, it was held in the same courthouse where he had humiliated himself just days before. Olivia attended, not as a witness, but as an observer, ensuring the process was transparent. The review board, comprised of senior officials and civilian oversight members, questioned Benson relentlessly about his actions in the courtroom and his track record as an officer. Despite his attempts to justify his behavior, The evidence against him was overwhelming. The board unanimously recommended his termination, and the district attorney announced that Benson would face criminal charges for assault and misconduct. As the decision was read aloud, Olivia watched Benson's face crumble. For the first time, he looked genuinely defeated. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, eager for a statement. Olivia stepped up to the microphones. "Today's decision is a step toward accountability," she said. "But this is just the beginning. The Charleston Police Department will continue to root out misconduct and rebuild trust with our community. I promise you that." Her words resonated far beyond Charleston. Across the nation, people took notice of her leadership and resolve. Letters of support poured in from citizens, community leaders, and even other police chiefs inspired by her approach. However, Olivia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing a culture entrenched in decades of complacency and prejudice would require persistence and unwavering commitment. In the weeks that followed, Olivia implemented sweeping reforms. She introduced mandatory bias training, increased community outreach programs, and created an anonymous tip line for reporting police misconduct. She also established a mentorship program to guide young officers in ethical policing practices. As for Benson, his fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. Once a figure of authority, he now faced the consequences of his actions in both the courtroom and the court of public opinion. His trial was set to begin, and Olivia made it clear she would not interfere. "Justice must be impartial," she said, "even for one of our own." Months later, as Olivia sat in her office reviewing progress reports, she received a visitor. It was the young defense attorney from the courthouse, the one who had represented the man Benson had wrongfully arrested. "I just wanted to thank you," he said. "What you're doing, it gives people like me hope." Olivia smiled. "Hope is the first step, but it's action that makes change." And change, she vowed, was something she would see through to the very end.